Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You are listening to Business Casual, our weekly podcast with my co-hosts Maria Wickvilla and Caroline Diarchi Edwards. But first, a word from our sponsor. If you're ready to bridge the gap between college and career and lead transformational change, Johns Hopkins Carey Business School offers specialized master's programs to help you get there. With full-time and part-time options, you can choose a format that fits your schedule while building skills employers value. Programs such as artificial intelligence, finance, business of health, information systems, marketing, and the real estate market. Develop practical skills that help you stand out in today's job market with no application fees through June 2nd. Now is the perfect time to apply. Learn more at carey.jhu.edu/MS. All right. Well, a new research ranking is out. Every year, the University of Texas at Dallas, the Jindal School of Management, publishes a ranking of the research outputs at business schools. In fact, they actually do two rankings, one for North America and then one global ranking. Now, you have to guess that a school that actually does this has to fare pretty well in the ranking itself. And of course, the Jindal School does. It's number 2 in North America and the world, according to its own ranking, which makes me very suspicious of it, of course. Wharton, however, is number 1 again, not only in North America, but globally. And I should also point out that when the Financial Times does its MBA ranking, it has a research category. And in fact, Wharton is number 1 in that as well. I'll just list the other big winners here. Columbia Business School is number 3. According to Jindal, Harvard Business School moves up to number 4, leapfrogging Chicago Booth, which slips to 5th. So there you have it. It's all, these are U.S. schools primarily in the UT ranking. In the FT research list, interestingly enough, Harvard is 2nd, Booth 3rd, NCOD 4th, and London Business School 5th. UT Dallas is 8th behind NYU Stern and Cornell Johnson. The bigger question, rather than who is first and who is second, is why should anyone outside academia actually care about this stuff? And if research is so important, why do applicants obsess over salaries and rankings instead? So let me ask Caroline first, and then Maria, should anyone pay attention to this if you're an applicant?
Sure. I think that research is something that's often overlooked. As you said, candidates typically focus on metrics that immediately impact them, and research may seem a bit more abstract and therefore perhaps less relevant to their experience. And I can understand that. And I'm sure some of the research is very abstract and not so relevant to the MBA experience. But schools invest a lot in their research output and attracting faculty who will do great research, because if you didn't have that, then there's going to be no new business thinking. There are going to be no new frameworks. Business schools will be sort of following rather than leading the debate. So I think it's absolutely critical to the business school ecosystem that you have this research capacity, which is really kind of the engine inside the business school. And of course, for the day-to-day experience of MBA candidates, quality of teaching has more impact than the quality of the research. But any good business school is trying to marry both together, right? So they're trying to translate that research into great teaching. And that's what the case study is. It's taking research and translating it into real life and bringing it to life for students. So, yeah, I think that research is very important. And, it's very impressive what Wharton has built up over the years. And it means not just that you are getting access to faculty who have an incredible reputation in their field, but it does also translate into great opportunities for students. So I was just chatting before our podcast with my colleague Judith Hadara, who used to work at Wharton, to ask about her perspective on this, given that Wharton is featured so prominently in these rankings. And she was talking about how, right now, of course, AI is central to a lot of what students want to learn about, and that is something that the research centers are addressing. So, for example, they've got Wharton Generative AI Labs, which actually gives students the opportunity to get hands-on experience of building AI tools, of testing how these tools work and how it applies in real life, and how sort of exploring how AI is actually changing organizations. So that can be very valuable to MBA students to get access to that cutting edge research. It can help to differentiate themselves in the job market, to get that hands on experience. So I definitely think it's worth students being aware of the research strengths of the schools that they might be applying to.
Yeah, and Wharton's dominance in this area is a function of its size, the fact that it has more than 20 research centers and initiatives across disciplines that range from finance and healthcare to AI, public policy, entrepreneurship. And those centers do create a pipeline of faculty collaboration and publication that, frankly, few schools can match. So it's a function of both the intent of the school and how it differentiates itself in the marketplace. It's also a function of the size and scale and the resources that the school has. Maria, should this matter to MBA applicants, though?
I mean, I think Caroline made some great points that research can in fact be a good litmus test. It's better to be on the cutting edge of some of these new ideas, especially with how rapidly business is changing. There are, with all with things moving so quickly, you don't want to be the professor teaching a new framework 3 years after it came out. So being the professors actually creating the frameworks is probably better. The other benefit too is that I think the professors, when they do the research, they are often working with companies themselves or leaders across various organizations. And so sometimes the professors themselves might have really good networking contacts for you as a student. That's it's a very indirect benefit of research, but the professors who are famous for their research are the ones getting invited to be the keynote speakers at various conferences, or they're being invited by C-suite executives to be on the board or to be a board observer for different companies, or there's all kinds of ways that being a research leader actually positions a professor well to meet lots of business leaders. So it's indirect, but that could be another benefit. So I do think that MBA applicants should look at it from sort of a position of curiosity. I do think, though, that it's not the number one thing that they should look at, because, to be clear, it's a benefit, but it's a very indirect benefit. And a professor who can research very well, but who can't actually explain to students what their research entails, is probably not, your first choice for a professor in the first place. So I think it's an interesting thing to look at. I think I would especially, it's probably more useful for you as an applicant to think about, what is my field of interest? Let's say it's operations management or it's digital marketing, and then look at the journals or the articles that are for your specific niche, and look to see who's a leader in that, and then try to see where those folks might be teaching. I think that's probably a bit more directly beneficial to you.
Now, Maria, do you think there's a correlation between strong research and better teaching, or is that a myth? In other words, there is a contrarian relationship where the greater emphasis on teaching often leads to weaker classroom performance by faculty.
Yeah, I mean, I think all schools, ideally, the unicorn type of professor is someone who is amazing at both of them. But sometimes the very skills that make someone an excellent researcher might not make them a great professor, and vice versa. The professor who's spending a lot of time with office hours and meeting with students and explaining things very well, every hour they spend doing that is an hour that they're not spending coming up with some brilliant new framework or new idea or theory. So, I don't know that it's necessarily always an inverse relationship, but it certainly can be.
Yeah. Caroline, do you think much of this research ever shows up in an MBA experience?
Well, I think that a lot of the frameworks that are taught in business school have come out of research. So, um, without research, I think the MBA curriculum would be pretty thin. And if you look at all of those research centers that Wharton has, for example, I mean, a lot of the electives relate to those research centers. So as Maria said, if you have a specific interest, then it's worth looking at those research hubs, because there may well be electives that are really strong that might relate to your specific interests, whether it's finance or healthcare or AI or whatever it might be. So, I mean, I had an opportunity when I was at INSEAD, when I was doing the MBA program myself, to get involved in some research. So I took the elective with Chan Kim and Rennie Mauborgne when they were working on their book about blue ocean strategy. And they were doing a project actually with the government to apply blue ocean strategy to their national strategy for positioning the country. And so my team got to participate in that research, and that was super interesting, really exciting. So, if you have, and that's something that is very applicable, right? Blue ocean strategy is something that you can apply to pretty much any job or any industry in any sector. So, yeah, some of it will be very abstract, but I think a lot of this research, business schools are very much looking for ways to translate it into practice and bridge that gap between academia and the classroom.
Yeah, my complaint about research in business schools sort of harks back to the 1950s in a way. There were two landmark reports, one funded by the Ford Foundation, the other by the Carnegie Mellon Foundation. And those reports criticized business schools at the time for being mere trade schools that lacked academic legitimacy. And because of the critique back in the 1950s, most business schools rushed headlong into very serious research, placing a priority on research over everything else. And, to this day, really, the research that a professor does largely determines whether or not he or she will get tenure or whether he or she will be promoted. And teaching often is second fiddle, if it's even considered at most business schools. So what happened is the pendulum swung from a place where schools did need academic legitimacy to a place where research became almost the entire game. And this is why even at some of the best schools, you will find that teaching quality is fairly uneven. It's kind of shocking that you can go to a great school, one of the best in the world, and some of the professors are absolutely awful, and then some are great. So, my issue with research has to do with the fact that schools over-index on it and under-index on teaching quality, accessibility to students, the mentoring of students. Faculty are truly dedicated to ensuring that a student gets a superior academic and classroom experience. And then there's the cost of research. I think there was a study done a few years ago that showed the cost to a school of getting a professor to publish a single article in a journal was well over $1 million, which seems to be an awful lot of money to get one article published in a journal that literally will be read by half a dozen people, which is often the case because this stuff is so dense and so esoteric. I mean, if you had to choose a school that produces knowledge or one that produces careers, what's the better bet? Maria.
I mean, as I wish I could be the intellectually noble person here to say that the pursuit of knowledge is by far the most important piece. But no, I mean, I think pragmatically people go to an MBA program and not a PhD program because they are more interested in their careers and in advancing their professional prospects, and not because they are themselves interested in that cutting edge those cutting edge ideas. If they were, then they would pursue the PhD instead.
Yeah, I mean, of course, research is important, and Caroline makes a really good point. you don't want to go to school where a bunch of people are telling old war stories from their days when they worked in real business, which of course most professors haven't had that experience because they've came up totally as academics who have studied a business topic or a discipline, but have never actually applied or worked in a business environment. But research is important. I have to say, as someone who has been transformed by professors, I just put so much faith in a great teacher. I mean, Caroline, would you trade a Nobel level researcher for a great teacher?
No, but it's great for the institution to have the Nobel Prizes. It definitely helps with prestige. It helps with attracting funding. So for the classroom experience, I agree that you prioritize the best teacher. And something else that I think is important to keep in mind, which we haven't mentioned, is that, of course, schools are trying to attract the best faculty, right? And faculty want to go and work at institutions where there are other great faculty who are doing great research so that they can be part of that wider ecosystem. So if a school has, and I remember being part of those debates when I was working at INSEAD, and the school has worked for decades on building up their research capability, and that shows in, especially in the FT ranking. And so you get this sort of virtuous cycle where if you have great faculty who are known for doing great research, then it's much easier to hire other great faculty because they want to go and work with those people and they're looking for opportunities to collaborate and interdisciplinary opportunities. And that helps to attract more funding and partnerships. And then you attract great PhD students. So there is a huge benefit to the whole ecosystem of having a positive circle going there with strong research and all of the sort of spillover effects that has. And definitely, for sure, in terms of attracting top talent and top professors to the school.
True. The other issue, of course, is just the ranking issue. Are these rankings on research and everything else just measuring what matters or just what's easy to measure? And, in the case of the UT Dallas, what they do is they pick 20 journals, pretty much A journals, in different disciplines, and they look at the publication records of individual faculty and the schools they're associated with over a 5-year period. The FT takes a different look, including more publications and counts articles over a shorter period of time. So you're getting a more recent look at it. All of these results obviously are impacted by what is measured. There may be journals that are just as important. They could be things like that are newer, interdisciplinary journals or journals that are more likely to run research on AI that may not have so-called A-level status and can be excluded from these rankings. And yet, given the importance of a topic like AI today, or given the importance of interdisciplinary research, which tends not to get much coverage in most of these journals, you could be missing out on a lot. So it's our usual cynicism overall about rankings that we all share. Maria, you are our biggest critic, I think. Uh,
Glad to be of service.
yes, weigh in on that.
I mean, I think one of the other critiques that folks should keep in mind is I think that, yeah, as you pointed out, the UT Dallas, it's based on a smaller number of journals. And also, yeah, when I was looking at it, it looks like almost all of these journals have been used in their ranking since 1990, which, as you were pointing
Right.
out, by definition, if any of them are, there's probably out there some pretty interesting journals that have come out since 1990 that should be added to the list. And the other thing I like about the FT ranking, so if one were to say, this is the one and only thing I'm going to base my MBA search on, and which one should it be, the FT ranking or the Dallas one? Another thing I like about the FT ranking is that I think that they account for how large the faculty size is in a given school. So,
Right.
I mean, that makes sense because if you have a larger school with more faculty, of course they're going to publish more, one would hope. So sort of looking at it from more of like a per capita or weighting the amount of publications, WEIGHT, not WAIT, weighting it based on how much faculty you have, I think also makes it fairer. Because yeah, like obviously if you've got all these different research programs that Wharton has, which is one of the reasons Wharton is such an amazing school, but there might be other smaller schools out there that in their little corner of the MBA universe, they're doing amazing things, but they're just a little bit smaller. And so that output number's a little bit smaller as well. So I like the FT one better.
Yeah, I do too, because I think the FT would include publications that are aimed at practitioners. And while, a lot of the research that goes on in business schools have no immediate applicability to an executive or a manager, I think it's important to recognize the publication of essays, articles, research that actually immediately benefits a practicing manager today. And the FT is far more likely to include things like Harvard Business Review and other things that would reflect that. Caroline, last words?
Well, I also think if you look at the FT ranking, there's quite a sensible group of schools at the top. So you've got
Yeah,
Wharton, Harvard, Booth, INSEAD, London Business School. So that sounds like a good peer group, right? It
indeed.
doesn't sound like a bizarre list that you see in some other rankings where it looks like they've just sort of thrown the names into a hat and pulled them out in random order. So,
We have certainly seen our share of bizarre lists.
one, or, one or two.
Only one or two, though. One or
Right.
two dozen, maybe.
So check out the piece on the Poets and Quants website. Wharton dominates the research rankings yet again, and you'll learn, where all the different schools are, how the UT Dallas rank differs from the FT rank. You can choose which one you prefer. I think all three of us prefer the FT over UT Dallas, and again, I am suspicious of any ranking that would, put a school that does it much higher than one would expect. But so be it. Meantime, as you think about your next step, Johns Hopkins Carey Business School offers a range of specialized master's programs to help you move forward with confidence. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills, switch paths, or advance in your current role, you'll gain practical career-focused experience that translates directly to the workplace. With full-time and flexible part-time options, you can take the next step on your terms and position yourself for stronger career outcomes after graduation. And with application fees waived now through June 2nd, there's never been a better time to get started. Get started today at Carey, that's carey.jhu.edu/MS. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for listening.